I'm Brian.
Hello, good morning. Brian Bulow from Planning Commission.
Nathan Woodworth on the Planning Commission.
Lori Lucas, community member serving on the Port Authority and also part of the steering committee and the economic development subcommittee.
Andrew Guzzo, Planning Commission.
Sadie Newman, community member and on the steering committee.
Thank you, those that are here. Rochelle, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Rochelle Schultz. I'm on the steering committee.
Next, Rahel.
Hi, I'm Rahel McConan. I am also on the steering committee, and I was also on the Riverside and Downtown subcommittee.
Perfect, thank you. And our consultants that are joining us here as well. Jeff and Rita, if you could introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Rita.
Oh, I was waiting for you. I'm Rita Trapp with HKGI, and we've been obviously involved in the process. So we're excited to hear all of the presentations today.
And I'm Jeff Miller with HKGI as well.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. Your microphone is a little spotty, so if you move a little bit closer if you're speaking, but otherwise you can hear us, correct?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect, sounds good. Okay, well, myself, Carlos Espinosa, city planner, I am here, and Luke Sims, assistant city planner, is driving today. So if anything comes up on Zoom, he will be the one handling that. Just a couple points of housekeeping real quick. We do have lunches for steering committee members that are here. If you ordered one, it's over on the table over there. We also ordered some additional ones. So even if you didn't put a specific order in with Luke, there's a sandwich there for you so you can have some sustenance as we move through the next hour and a half here. So in addition to that, we have the agenda packets up online as well as paper copies for everybody that is here. And those are located right at the entrance as well. So without further ado, the first subcommittee that we'll introduce and start talking about is housing and neighborhoods. And we have Amanda Headland here that will give a brief introduction as to what that subcommittee took a look at, and Nick Larson as well from staff that can follow up with discussion of goals and objectives. Amanda, please.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm Amanda Headland with Habitat for Humanity and also a member of the Housing and Neighborhoods Subcommittee. And we started our work grounded in the Maxfield research that had been done with the housing study in 2016 with the previous comprehensive plan and with the findings from Engage Winona as our grounding. I was really impressed with the diversity of thought, experience, and opinion on our committee, really covering a wide range of social services, landlords, business owners, and community people. We also had a nice age range of experience in there. And so what you'll find in our report is the direct opinions of each individual. And Nick was great about just really being detailed and explicit and presenting them all for you to sort through as you look at what we saw as priorities. And so you'll see a lot of differences of opinion and differences of priority, but they all gelled around a lot of interest in neighborhood cohesion while we look to increase housing choice and looking at ways to add density in ways that are respectful, collaborative, and community-centered so that Winona can continue to be vibrant and recognizable as it is, while hopefully supporting population growth in our industry and community as a whole. So that's my summary, pretty brief, but I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Amanda. Steering committee with the housing subcommittee, when we developed our goals and objectives, we were very intentional about using the term homes rather than housing, just because of the negative connotations that can come with the term housing, along with homes that are attainable to all income levels relative to affordable housing. So I just want to point that out with the other items that Amanda pointed out. I'm just going to go through a couple of the highlights or just pinpoint some of the goals and objectives that the housing subcommittee worked on and had very robust discussions about through our 7 meetings. On page 3, we really spoke about zoning and amending zoning in commercial light manufacturing zones to allow for new residential homes. And again, homes that could be your stereotypical detached single-family home or apartment complexes. That's how the group discussed this. When people speak about homes, one's apartment is also one's home. So we just want to make that clear. Point 8.11 is to evaluate the 30% rule around WSU on those saturated blocks. 8.13 is through infill development and redevelopment efforts to increase housing choices. And this would be ADUs, move-up homes, single-family homes, duplexes, artist live workspace, housing choices that are currently not available in Winona. 8.15 also on page 3. Again, this is where we hit on to create a variety of homes that are attainable to all income levels, from those that are fixed income all the way to executive housing. All those housing choices are needed. And as a strategy to try to create more homes is 8.17 is consider creating a land trust. We'll continue on to page 4 with to be able to 8.21 is support the designation of the 4 blocks east of Main Street as WSU and city partnership. And 8.22 is allow for full residential buildings to surround the core downtown areas of 2nd and 3rd Streets by removing the mixed use requirements within the fringe area of the downtown mixed use zoning district. We'll continue on with goal 9.1 is to proactively enforce the city's home and yard maintenance standards. And then 9.3 is to encourage the creation of community-based services position to assist disabled and low-income households to access the supportive services they need, along with the resources to maintain their homes, which then also ties in with seniors so they can be able to age in place. And then 9.99 is to promote the green building standards, building science principles, and low-impact development technologies to minimize storm runoff and improve energy efficiency. Goal 10, specifically 10.1, through census data, it was determined that those earning under $20,000 a year, that's our largest cost burden population, which by cost burden, that is a household that spends 30% or more of their earned income on housing costs. So that was specifically identifying a demographic of our population that maybe needs additional support. Turn the page to page 5. Goal 10.2 is to identify and promote the resource to allow Winonans to age in place. Moving to goal 10.8 is to provide public transit options close to housing, employment, and services to lessen the hardships that cost burden households endure. And 10.11 encourage the city to introduce policies addressing homelessness through community partnerships to provide strategies to ease those that are unsheltered and in need of stable housing. We'll continue on with our first-time home buyers. 11.4 is continue the existing partnership between the Port Authority of Winona County in conveying tax forfeit properties to Habitat for Humanity to construct homes for low to moderate income families. Along with 11.2 is for the city to continue its participation with Minnesota Housing to be able to secure funds for local lenders for first-time home buyers. And lastly, I'll go to page 6, parenthesis number 3 is examine the intent and purpose of the Bluff Land Protection Overlay District to evaluate if the district is overly restrictive to development relative to other river cities' bluff land protection policies. And then 5, to evaluate parking minimums and possibly to allow developers to prove the amount of parking that their housing product needs by conducting a parking market analysis. And then we have time for any questions or comments from the steering committee. Hearing none, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick and Amanda. Appreciate that very much. All right. Our next topic is land use. And Steve.
Good morning. How we all doing? I am so glad I brought my cheaters. Being 53 years old, I'm just adjusting to these. And so occasionally I attend meetings where I forget them, and it's difficult. But anyway, okay, here we are. I was part of the land use subcommittee, and I have a few summary items for you. I would say, and I'm really glad that that housing went before me sharing with you, because many of the same themes, and I think we were in agreement with them. So that's a positive thing. So I will bring up some of those same topics as I share with you right now. If we talked about one thing, probably the most important thing that I felt we talked about on our land use subcommittee was flexibility. Flexibility for development, flexibility for housing, flexibility, and I'll be more specific on that in a moment. And one of the key areas of that flexibility, or maybe I could call it efficiency, ease of use, would be going from 19 land use designations down to 13. So we went through all 19 of these, what they are, how can we condense, how can we simplify, how can we be more efficient? Remember, we still do have zoning tools at our disposal. And you two over here, Luke and Carlos, throw something at me if I'm way out of line. But we do have zoning tools to correct or modify if some sort of development is inappropriate. Anyway, proposing to simplify those land use designations. That would reduce the need for variances, which is healthy. One of the specific things that I was excited about that I liked was adding residential options for commercial zoning districts. I think I heard some of that in housing. So just imagine this. This was the example that really sat with me. Think of the strip mall, strip store type things that are near Menards or Walmart. What if we had residential on top of those? What if we had a really nice development with commercial on the bottom, offices or mercantile, and then residential on the top? Think of where those are located. You're near stores, you're near food, you're near medical care, and you're near the park system. What a deal. Also, we reviewed the need to review land use, especially near Winona State. This was mentioned in housing, where it's already heavily rental. Does that make sense to change that to multifamily? That should be explored. Another one that I really liked that we talked about in our subcommittee was permitting small scale commercial use in the core area of Winona. So you take such well-known establishments of Blado's Flowers on Broadway, High and Low Tavern. Those are basically illegal right now, but we could re-legalize them, reestablish them. Or here's where it really hit home for me. You take the former corner grocery stores. And if you're not from town, just look at corner old brick buildings that are scattered all through our town. Mostly those are apartments now. They're not legal to become a grocery store again, or to become a coffee shop, or to become something else that would likely fit with the neighborhood. We want to re-legalize those, or we're proposing to discuss that. Okay. Again, on housing, allowing owner occupied triplexes on a standard lot, discuss that, allowing having some more allowances for duplexes and other secondary type units on smaller lots. Also, we discussed, is our bluff land setbacks too restrictive? Okay, I could take questions. I hit the highlights. I'm going to leave this to the experts. In this case, Carlos, because he's coming up. I'll stand by for questions.
All right, thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Steve hit a lot of the main highlights that we have from the land use subcommittee that we took a look at. But again, we mainly focused on how do we increase more flexibility? How do we allow more flexibility within the city here? And really incorporating mixed use into not just commercial areas, but also light industrial areas on the fringes of light industrial areas too. So where are those opportunities within our current land use pattern to add in additional housing units where it is appropriate? That's definitely something that we focused on. Another big thing that we focus on is allowing for change while preserving neighborhood character. That's one thing that is key, I think, when you're taking a look at a comprehensive plan, is introducing the possibility for change without wholesale changing a neighborhood or wholesale changing a place. What we're looking to do is that incremental change, that thickening up that we heard about with our presentation from Chuck Marone at Strong Towns, thickening up in terms of what can we add to our existing infrastructure and our existing built up area that promotes a sustainable city in our current traditional development pattern. So taking a look at goals, objectives, and strategies, the first goal that we had was expanded opportunities for redevelopment and new development. We took a look at vacant parcels, redevelopment of existing properties and buildings, and then facilitating new residential subdivisions. New residential subdivisions is something that we haven't seen a lot of since the last plan was adopted in 2007. And so there's some specific ways that we think we can take a look at opening that up a bit. You've heard this mentioned a couple of times, but taking a look at some of the bluffland regulations, specifically outside of the Mississippi River corridor, to see if we can maybe relax those or introduce some flexibility, while at the same time preserving our natural resources that provision of code is intended to do. So it's balancing the need and potential opportunities for new development with protecting our natural resources. Moving on, goal 2 is that flexibility in land use designations and zoning districts. And this is where Steve mentioned that we reduce the number of land use designations that are recommended in this plan, really to try and streamline things a little bit more. Under 2.2, you'll see additional uses, adding those to zoning districts. And this is where we're trying to incorporate some of that more mixed use and housing into not just commercial areas, but also the light industrial zoning district as well. Then you'll see under 2.2.3, permitting owner-occupied duplexes within existing structures or with small additions to existing parcels in the residential suburban land use designation. So essentially what we're talking about here is adding the ability to have an owner-occupied duplex within an existing home or with a small addition for those properties that are generally located south of Highway 61, the more suburban area of the city. Predominantly, those areas right now are single-family housing. We see that continuing into the future. But what we'd like to explore is the introduction of a limited number of owner-occupied duplexes in that area in order to allow for people to more adequately use some of those larger houses that are in those areas, despite what we have, which is a declining household size. So think of moving into a house and adding another unit for your mother-in-law, father-in-law, or a relative so that they can live with you on the same lot in the same house. But again, what we're looking to do with that is allow the introduction of additional housing units while maintaining neighborhood character. So that's where you see that owner-occupied provision and looking at doing it within existing homes or with small additions to existing homes. Next, under goal 3, we have efficient use of land adjacent to city utilities. And this speaks to taking a look at development opportunities adjacent to where we have sewer and water utilities in the ground currently. In addition to that, as you take a look at 3.2 and 3.3, when we're taking a look at expansion outside of city boundaries, what we want to do is take a look at the impacts that has on our current level of services and make sure that that's assessed when we're considering utility expansion. Moving on to goal number 4, maintaining neighborhood character while allowing for change. That's something I mentioned as one of the highlights that we took a look at, but specifically what we want to try and do is under 4.1.1 is enact zoning regulations to provide a gradual transition between land uses. Right now in our comprehensive plan, we have some pretty hard lines between one land use and another land use. And so what we'd like to do is to kind of make that transition a little bit more gradual to maintain neighborhood character. Goal 5 is resilient neighborhoods. And this section really speaks to diversity of housing types within all neighborhoods in Winona and the importance of that in maintaining and strengthening our community. And goal number 6, of course, is preserving and enhancing our natural resource areas. And there's a number of different provisions in that section. We will also talk about that at a future steering committee meeting at the end of September when we talk about our environmental subcommittee. Next, I'll briefly go to the next page here and talk a little bit about our future land use designations. And the future land use designations, again, these are designations that guide the zoning in the city of Winona. So the land use designations look out to the year 2045 and they say, what do we generally want to see in certain areas of the city? And then based on those designations, we can make decisions on whether or not individual properties can be rezoned or not, or how the zoning should be modified in order to enact these land use designations. So it's kind of a two-step process. And these new land use designations would set the stage for more zoning flexibility and introduction of additional housing units into many different areas within the city of Winona. So on the first page, I'll first note at the bottom, commercial mixed use. Our current comprehensive plan only lists a commercial designation. And that's really a singular type use. What we want to do with that is introduce the ability for housing units to be in areas like Steve mentioned, adjacent to like the Walmart areas, the commercial strip areas, to introduce more mixed use into those areas. Flipping over to the next page, page 2, taking a look at limited industrial, office, and fringe residential. This is where we look to incorporate additional housing units into some of the light industrial areas, but at the fringes of those light industrial areas. A lot of the light industrial areas that we have in town here, at the fringes of those light industrial areas, there already are residential homes. So it's essentially providing, again, that gradual change between industrial to residential. Of course, right below that, we preserve areas for general industrial. These are uses that are suggested to be separated from housing units, things that are more intense impacts and may have some off-site impacts to adjacent properties. The next one that I want to highlight is suburban residential. This is a pretty broad land use category that we would look to apply to essentially all of the land south of Highway 61. And so what it would do is it would promote a mix of housing styles in new subdivisions, ones that are approved after adoption of the comprehensive plan, but then also encourage predominantly single-family homes. And again, those two-family owner-occupied dwellings or owner-occupied duplexes in existing subdivisions. So within existing subdivisions, you could have up to a duplex as long as it's owner occupied. But for new subdivisions, we'd look to make sure that we incorporate a variety of housing types in those new subdivisions, something similar to what we have in Knott Valley or Valley Oaks in the current time. Next, we have traditional neighborhood, and really that land designation would apply to all of the land north of Highway 61, kind of the traditional development area of the city of Winona. And finally, we have multifamily residential. These are areas that could potentially have some missing middle housing. Missing middle housing is that housing in between the 1 and 2 unit category and larger apartment buildings. So it's that gap in housing between 2 units and 10 units essentially that we'd be looking to encourage in some of these areas. Next, we have outdoor recreation, open space, and city-owned properties. Under this category, this is basically a catch-all for a lot of the city, not just natural resource properties or park properties that we own, but also our facility properties as well. Semi-public or institutional, this is an existing land use designation from our 2007 comprehensive plan, but we wanted to reiterate it in this plan and specifically make provisions to create these zoning districts, a new zoning district for semi-public and institutional uses such as Winona Health or WSU. Right now, those 2 areas have pretty restrictive zoning regulations that are based on residential land uses. Well, that doesn't make sense in these institutional type settings where buildings are generally larger, take up greater footprints. So what we want to do is adjust the zoning in those areas so that variances are not needed to construct buildings that are in the same character as those institutional areas. Finally, we have our expansion areas at the bottom of page 3, County Road 17 residential corridor. The County Road 17 residential corridor, Pleasant Valley. Essentially what we're looking at there is a mix of different residential subdivisions moving out into the future. The other expansion areas on the last page, Highway 43 and County Road 44 is having more of a mixed use in those expansion areas. And essentially those expansion areas would go all the way down to I-90, which is the same land area that is mentioned in our existing 2007 comprehensive plan, but it provides for a greater mix of uses along these corridors. And it goes from more of a distinct land use category for distinct pieces of land to more of a corridor running south from the city. So think along Highway 43 or 44, Garvin Heights Road, having a mix of different land uses as you move south from the city. So again, that speaks to introducing some additional flexibility in future land uses outside of existing city boundaries. That's all that I have. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Carlos. On page 3 of the original, the land use report, not the designations, number 4.1.2. What are by right options for investment in parentheses permitted with standards?
Sure, that's a little bit jargony when it comes to planning language. And so some of this that you're seeing, I'll just preface this by saying a lot of this is first draft. We saw a lot from the subcommittees. We encourage everybody to get their ideas down on paper with the idea and with the acknowledgement that things will be modified as we go through the approvals process. One of those things is addressing language that might be a little bit difficult to understand for a lay person. And so by right options for investment permitted with standards, essentially what that speaks to is allowing somebody to do something with a limited set of standards and not have to go in front of the planning commission, not have to go in front of the city council as long as they meet those standards. So it makes it easier for somebody to do something that we're looking to have happen in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next section. The next section is economic development, and Mike Dieter from that subcommittee is coming forward to provide some perspective on how that went.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, excited that we're finally here. Kudos to the rest of the subcommittee that put in a lot of hard work. Lori and Jeff Van Fossen and the rest of the gang. So excited to share with everyone kind of our goals and objectives. Number one, I think this is probably our most important one. If we actually want to see economic growth in Winona and surrounding areas, how do we get more people to come here? When we think back months and months and months ago, when we first started to talk about some of the planning, one of the numbers was brought up of, I think, 1,000 extra people. And somebody brought up, well, how are we going to do that if we don't put any focus on it? I'm a transplant. My wife and I moved here 4.5 years ago from Colorado. I think a lot of people probably in this room are not Winonans by birth, but we stay and we came here for a certain reason. So when you think about all the amazing things that we love about here, whether it's the river, the bluffs, the community, our vibrant downtown, great places to work and dine, are we telling the world about it? So I encourage you to all check out a website called thinkauclair.com. They do a fantastic job of telling the story of Eau Claire. Now, watch it. It's like 2 minutes long, but don't fall in love with it too much because we want everyone to stay here, but we need to do something like that. And basically, playing to the emotions of what's the best part about Winona. To do that from a high level, we need to have collaboration. This can't be just city-led. This needs to include our higher ed universities and colleges. It needs to have the chamber involved, visit Winona. But is there one cohesive message that we're putting out there to the world? And then how can we actually use that to target the right groups of people? When a natural disaster occurs, when economic downturn happens in a different community, when people are just done with where they're living. Similar reasons why I left Colorado and other people moved here in the first place. It doesn't have to be just driven by a job. You can fall in love with the community and then find the other pieces later. Yeah, so really exciting there. Number two, our second goal there, to provide a strong community culture for businesses to start, thrive, and grow, and definitely having diverse businesses. So when we look specifically of what are the barriers of a new business starting or business expansion? Part of that might be land use. And so if there's different types of land they're currently used in one capacity, how can it be revamped, retooled to serve a different purpose? Using possibly some areas of the bluffs or other natural resources while still respecting the nature aspect of that. Really looking at utilizing different funding sources. Maybe it's federal grants, state grants, regional or local. But again, going back to that barrier piece from the city level, one topic that kept getting brought up over and over again was food trucks and different dining opportunities that way, whether they're serving businesses for their lunches in some of these food desert areas where there's not a quick option. It might be for some of our festivals and things like that. How can we incentivize more businesses to come in and visit and really set up shop here? Do we need to relook at the licensing requirements, but making it business friendly? If there is a business that's coming to town or it's interested in relocating or starting in Winona, where's the source that they go to, right? There's a lot of different avenues, the Small Business Development Center, the chamber, the city, but is there kind of like a hot button, right? When someone's ready to go, they really want to know all the answers. How can we kind of fast light or green light that process and get them all the information they need? Looking at kind of that first year of business is usually the most challenging for a lot of businesses. And so are there ways that we can remove some of those barriers, whether it's licensing or fees or taxes, where it kind of gives them a break for that first year? They're still going to be on the hook for, you know, future growth and development, but yeah, make it easy for them. Community kitchen was another thing to look at as well. Goal number 3, I'm encouraging development and redevelopment in Winona and downtown. Really going along the guidelines that's set forth in the downtown subcommittee, looking at a couple of their, I guess, different requirements, parameters. So going in line with that, but again, from a growth standpoint, how can we support those efforts? Sustain and invest for the riverfront to be vibrant and relevant, I think is a huge one, right? Going back to the riverfront subcommittee as well. So how can these all tie in together, knowing that if the downtown is the heart of our city, putting the most resources, support, and encouragement there, it's definitely going to impact the rest of our community. Looking at goal number 4, foundational assets for economic development. So when we look at sustained economic development, you really need to have these key parts. Housing is huge. So if we get 1,000+ people to move here, where are we going to put them, right? So there has to be affordable housing, new builds, remodeling, reusing some of the current things that we have. Our workforce is huge. So again, we can attract all these new businesses to come or to start up or to relocate here. I work in staffing. That's my career by choice. And so we know every single day it's hard. Minnesota has the lowest unemployment rate out of all 50 states at 1.8%. So we can borrow from Wisconsin and Iowa and other parts of our state as well to help Winona grow. Childcare is one of the biggest issues when you look at a working parent household. Can we take some cues from private companies like Quick Trip headquarters down in La Crosse? One of the first innovative ones to open up their own childcare center on site. It helps with recruiting, it helps with retaining. So are there things at a government level that we can do to try to streamline the process and incentivize more people to offer childcare? Right now we're seeing the opposite. In-home daycares are closing every single day. There's wait lists for all of the larger centers. And unfortunately, it's just not affordable for most two-parent or even single-parent income. Transportation, I think, is huge. Right now, we have a great bus system. We have a couple of private companies offering cabs and stuff, but these are between the hours of usually 6 a.m., 6:30 up until 5:30 or 6. So we're missing 2/3 of our working class working the second shift hours. They might be able to get a bus to work, but they're definitely not going to be able to get a ride home at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. Or our third shifters, right? They might be able to get a ride home after their shift is over, but how do they get there? So are there certain areas or pockets that we can identify that would be high impact areas? The bus lines don't need to run their entire route constantly, but are there some of these zones that we could have, really good public transportation accessing on those off hours? And then safety. Who doesn't want to feel safe in their community? Going back to the Think Eau Claire website, that was one of the things that they highlighted on too. So actually a lot of these, right? When we talk about housing and workforce and schools and childcare and transportation and all that, there's this whole story that needs to be told. Well, if we don't have all of the parts and they're not in good working order, then we shouldn't be talking about it. Goal number 5 for technology and economic development. We know technology changes and it changes fast. And so as a community, we need to be on the front side of that, being an innovator. Some of the highlights might include, high-speed internet to all parts of our town. It's going to help people who can choose to live in Winona, even if they're working for a company that's located in San Francisco or New York or somewhere else. And so if they don't have the technology and the fastest internet available to be able to do that, it does limit their options. Point 5.12, incorporate technology into our current infrastructure. So the city doesn't need to lead the charge on, having all these different festivals and performances and stuff. But if we could have the bones put in, when we look at Levy Park, I don't know how many people went to the Big Muddy Bruin Queue this last weekend. It was fantastic. Well, the stage cost 3 times more this year to rent than it did in previous years. Other communities have highlighted stages that are built in, right? So you have all your audio needs and all your electrical needs, even the stage itself already built in, and it can be rented for a much more affordable cost. What other festivals, what other concerts, what other things could private citizens or groups put on if the infrastructure was already in place? Having better wiring for food trucks, and Levy Park is just one example. Maybe there's other areas of town that could also be looked at. Looking at different Wi-Fi hub locations. There's some private businesses at work. You can go in, get a cup of coffee and use the internet for free. The library during their open hours is a great place to access the internet, but internet access is almost a necessity in life nowadays, almost as important as water or food, right? Especially when we talk about economic growth, people looking for a job, starting up a new business idea, something like that. So are there different hubs or locations around town? Briefly talked, and I don't know if it's quite in this plan, but kind of having that incubator kind of mentality. And so when people are starting up a business or kicking around the idea, getting like-minded people around and different resources for that in one spot. Electric vehicle charging stations. Like it or not, they're coming. We can either slowly adapt to it, and eventually we're going to have to provide them all over town, or we could be one of the innovators of this. And there are a couple of spots around town, but why not be a destination for the next 10 years while the rest of the state catches up, where we can draw from Minneapolis, we can draw from Chicago, all these other places where Winona is now a destination location for that. They can spend their dollars here in town while their vehicle's charging and then go home and maybe decide to move here in the process. Goal number 6, looking to invest in recreational and cultural amenities. So this is twofold. We know it benefits our residents in our community. We know it can be a draw for people to want to move here if there's just a great blend and marriage of the recreational, the cultural, the arts, everything like that, because that's the fun part of life, right? Not just the work side. The other part of it is for visitors. And so when we look at the ice climbing wall that's been going on for a couple of years now, how many people from not only Minnesota, but from all over the world come to our town because it is unique and different. So yes, parks are important and hiking is important, and we already have the river, but are there bigger, grander things like a zip line through the forest, maybe on city-owned property? Is there a tubing hill, not to compete with the ski hill up in Wabasha or down in La Crosse, but things that are going to bring in people from all over the country, or at least regionally, to come visit, spend their nights in a hotel, eat at our restaurants, invest in Winona. And we know Pat Mutter was on our community, and so we had the champion of tourism for Visit Winona. I don't remember the exact statistic, but she said somewhere of the amount of people that decide to move to a new community after visiting it. And so how can we know that our doors for Winona are open? We have a lot of opportunities to encourage visitors, knowing that that's going to be part of our sustainable growth. If we don't constantly have new people looking at our community to visit, spend their money here, invest in our community, and potentially move, eventually we're just going to slowly trickle down, and the next census is going to come out and we're going to be at 22,000. And the next one's going to come out, we're going to be at 19,000. That's not feasible for growth in Winona. Yeah. Any questions on any of this?
Seeing no questions, I'll invite Lucy McMartin, Director of Community Development, if she has anything she would like to add to that lovely overview from Mr. Dieter.
Thank you, and thanks to the committee members and Mike for doing such a great job of presenting the goals and objectives. We did start with taking a look at the 2007 comprehensive plan, and we did incorporate some of the economic development goals and objectives from that plan. One example of how we tweaked the business growth or what we're trying to do is in the 2007 comprehensive plan, we talked about marketing Winona as a composites cluster. And of course, we have many composite businesses, and we want to continue to recognize that we have that cluster, which is very valuable to us. But the more higher level goal is to help all businesses and to really promote all businesses to Winona, not just that specific cluster. So that's an example of a change that was made in this plan. Also, I think technology really came through and how important that is. As Mike said, it's just critical. It's it's like road and infrastructure and water and sewer. It's really needed. And that's why it has a goal in and of itself in the new section of the plan. And then that vision and marketing and really understanding that it's so important to have this one vision for marketing. And it can't just be the city, and it can't be the chamber, and it can't be Visit Winona. And we also have to figure out how to finance it, as we do most everything in the comprehensive plan. And that is a big challenge. It requires us to prioritize our goals and objectives, and that's what the plan helps us do. I think Mike did a good job of outlining what the goals and objectives were and the strategies, and happy to answer any questions. I will add, we are in the middle of not rewriting, but we're editing this piece right now. We do have to add the Visit Winona tourism importance to our economy as part of this plan. And we had a few other sections about barriers to businesses and ideas we were going to put in here. But this generally gives you an outline of what the committee worked on. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Guzzo, go ahead, grab that microphone.
Thanks, Lucy. Mike, very informative piece. Any conversation through your group around the most recent last couple of years activities of many visitors being introduced to Winona via the riverboats and the pending increase of that activity, not only for us, but all communities along the Mississippi River corridor, and how that might fit into this topic?
Yeah, we definitely talked about that. Pat was pretty adamant of it's amazing that we have people coming to us, right? Now we don't have to go out and reach all corners of the world. We have 27 something boats coming to us every single summer. How can we embrace it even more? Some of the frustration was that maybe a lot of the shops or restaurants are not open during those docking times. We love that we have an accessible riverfront. There's almost this battle with the locals and, wanting to park a boat there, and then, oh, wait, we have a giant cruise ship coming in. How can we accommodate both? At our last meeting, we kind of brought up, is there something to be done? And we weren't sure, is it economic development related, or is it more of the riverfront plan? But how can we incorporate access to our levee for smaller boats? Maybe it's building a separate docking system or something. It was great at this last weekend to see, half a dozen or more boats that were tied up to the levee. So people are using it and accessing it. How do we play now with both? Are there festivals or concerts or events that can be planned around some of these river dockings as well? Maybe there's a clear liaison or a group that can be there for more information about the community for these tour groups, not just let them explore on their own and hope they end up back here.
Any other questions at this time for economic development? And I don't want to forget about our friends online. If you do have anything to add, feel free to press that raise hand button or just jump right in. Seeing no further questions, we are going to move on to our next section, which is heritage preservation. And for that, we have Aaron Perleberg and Jessica Richards from that subcommittee who both wanted to provide an overview of how that process played out and what the key themes were.
All right, thank you. So basically heritage preservation, I'm really happy that we're following economic development because I think that should be part of the conversation as well. You know, we have a lot of historic homes and buildings, and that would be great for tourism, draw people in, right? So a lot of things we're going to talk about here is creating awareness, education, and outreach with current owners, that kind of thing. So the first goal is improve awareness and visibility of historic districts. We did a walk with Engagement Winona downtown, and signage right now is very much lacking in the city as far as what kind of historic homes and districts there are. So we want to help improve that. The second goal here is improve education for historic districts and sites for owners and tenants of properties. So reach out to the owners of buildings, you know, help them and, you know, if there's things they can do to improve the building, if there may be any tax incentives or even the tenants who use the buildings as well. Kind of bring them all in the conversation so we all know what's going on there. Goal number 3 here, increase in visibility with lesser known historic districts, sites, and cultural landscapes in the city. So right now, you know, we do have some current designated districts, but we also have a lot of buildings and homes that are outside of those districts that could and should be recognized. So even if they're not right now in the neat district, they're still unique and beautiful. We should recognize them in some way or another. The fourth one here is create and communicate financial incentives for reinvestment in historic districts and properties. So we don't want to just tell them what they can and cannot do, but also help them somehow with some sort of incentive, whether it be tax breaks or other maintenance upkeep, that kind of thing. Number 5 here, goal number 5 is maintain certified local government status and upheld historic surveys of Winona. So I think the last survey was Luke 2007, is that correct? 91? It's been a while.
1991 to 1993.
Yes, so we're past due for that. And so we definitely want to update that for maintain our local government status. And I'm going to pass this on now to Jessica for the rest.
Hi, guys. My name is Jessica. I also served on the Heritage Preservation Subcommittee. In addition, Aaron and I are both commissioners on the Heritage Preservation Commission for the city of Winona. So we're coming at it with kind of a dual view on Winona's heritage preservation. I'll pick up where he left off with goal number 6, nominate properties to the National Register of Historic Places and local designation consistently. This is a goal from the previous comprehensive plan that the commission has actually maintained and done a good job. And we think that there's value in that and we want to keep doing it. Goal number 7, encourage infill in the downtown districts and other parts of the city. We talked about needing to increase the density and utilizations of our historic districts in a way that complements and really honors the value of Winona's history. Goal number 8, directly notify and reach out to property owners who own eligible properties on an annual basis. We're not sure that all the property owners who live in historic properties or business owners who own historic properties in Winona know the value of the space that they're residing in, and including the economic value that it can add to them and just kind of the history that it contributes to the city of Winona. So we think that an outreach program to those owners would be valuable. 9, directly support the Winona County Historical Society. Knowing that it is not directly affiliated with the city of Winona, we wanted to officially say on our subcommittee that we know the value that Winona County Historical Society has for the preservation of Winona history, including their archival materials and their space that they open up for the public to view. And we think that the city of Winona should become a financial supporter of them on an annual basis and continue that partnership. Goal 10, deconstruction should be encouraged rather than demolition. We discussed the benefits of salvaging materials and deconstructing historic properties in a way that benefits the environment and also preserves the historic value of the materials when a property itself cannot be saved. Last one, goal 11, prevent demolition by neglect. This is something that came up in our subcommittee conversations, but also has been a topic of discussion in our Heritage Preservation Commission as well. There have been a loss of important historic structures in Winona over the last 5 years that happened not because of any intentional decision or because no one valued them, but because by the time that the repair was needed, it was too far gone and it wasn't financially viable to do anymore. The feedback that we've been getting from building owners and as a commission is that the current ordinances for the city of Winona we don't have a system that adequately addresses the need to prevent demolition by neglect. And so we'd like for the comprehensive plan to look at that moving forward. So those were all the goals for our subcommittee. If you have any questions, Aaron and I are here and available to answer them. Yes.
I don't have any questions, but a couple kudos. On page 3, I'm so excited about showing placards or whatever in what used to be here and who used to be here. I just think that is underused. It would be so exciting I'm a native Winonan, so I remember a lot of that, but for people who come to see what used to be here, where the library used to, or not the library, I'm sorry, where the post office used to be, where some other buildings, fantastic. And
Absolutely. We talked about the importance of populations that used to be here too and highlighting them in the history of Winona.
Super. And one other also, and we talk about this at the Port Authority because we see some buildings go through neglect. And we talk often about what we can do to ensure that that doesn't happen anymore. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon now, steering committee members. My name is Luke Sims. I do just want to add a couple of elements to the excellent summary provided by the members of the Heritage Preservation Subcommittee. You'll see under goal number 1, really kind of a consistent theme throughout this subcommittee process relies on communication. And 1.1 highlights that comprehensive signage plan for Winona's historic districts and sites. And this builds on wayfinding signage that we've utilized in the past and trying to have comprehensive signage across the city of Winona, as well as 1.3, implementing a strategic communications plan for the heritage of Winona. As we look at communications across the city, it's important to recognize that we need to be cohesive and have a comprehensive plan as we look to communicate to our residents and to those who visit us for tourism. And then 1.4, incorporating placemaking and streetscaping into public infrastructure investments to create a sense of place in Winona's heritage districts. Heritage Preservation was one of the Winona Walks tours that we did with the community. And one of the questions that we asked them was, how do you know that you're in a historic district aside from older architecture? And the answer was, we don't really know, but there is a sense of feeling when you do enter those types of places. And that's things like looking at our former street pavers, looking at the way we implement sidewalks, curb extensions, how we incorporate lighting. All of those elements add to that sense of place that we have in our historic districts. And then if we jump over to goal 3.4, that's on page 3 of this section or page 22 of your overall document, I do want to really highlight the Indigenous populations focus and other underrepresented groups. That's something that hasn't been touched on in our past comprehensive plan action, and it's important that we do highlight it. I'm going to jump ahead now over to goal number 7, which is on page 5 of the section and page 24 of your overall document. Goal number 7 is encouraging infill in the downtown historic districts and other parts of the city. And here the subcommittee felt it was very important to demonstrate that we need to relax regulations to encourage reinvestment in our community, specifically in downtown. So you'll see a number of elements there, including exploring zoning incentives and changes and identifying underutilized and vacant parcels and partnering with organizations to make sure that we are seeing that reinvestment. One of the lines that we like to use is we don't have old buildings because they are old, we have old buildings because they are loved. And that takes time and investment in our community. And then jumping out down to our last goal, goal number 11, preventing demolition by neglect. There we really have 3 objectives there. It's compelling maintenance, but it's also creating incentives for maintaining older buildings and then also maintaining that existing building stock. We need to be aware of how buildings are deteriorating so that we don't get to that point. So this is recommending kind of an inventory system so that we can actually look at how our buildings are doing over time. And with that, I want to be cognizant of the fact that we are nearing the end of the nearing noon, 12 o'clock for transportation. And if there are any questions, I am available for them. All right, seeing no questions, I'm going to introduce Mitch Johnson, who's going to talk to the steering committee about transportation and how that process played out.
Thank you, Luke. All right, so as Luke said, I'm Mitch Johnson, and I'm Transportation Subcommittee. Fact that I learned surface streets take up 30% of our land. So needless to say, this is a pretty big topic. And by definition, it touches every single other topic because you have to get to them, right? So I only got 5 minutes, so here we go. What came up immediately was how blessed Winona is with our grid system. Regardless of what route you want to take, if you want to go into the neighborhoods or out of the neighborhoods, it's a 5-minute car ride away. You can pretty much get anywhere you want in the town in about 5 minutes in a car. So we're lucky to have this base level of infrastructure. That being said, we did notice, there are some places where we don't take full advantage of this design. So our streets, like I just said, they work really great for cars and getting things quickly from one side of town to the other. And it always will because of the grid, but there are many busy streets where speeding and sometimes trucks going down the wrong route and things like that inhibit pedestrian and bike traffic. One way that we thought to address this was by narrowing the width of some of the lanes of the roads. I live on Huff Street, for example, and when I watch people drive on Huff Street, you can swerve in the lane, if that makes sense. So it's so wide that, you don't even have to go straight in the lane. That's just one low-hanging fruit example. And then also adding things like attractive, low maintenance, landscaping on busier streets to promote it to be this is a residential street. Maybe we should go a little bit slower just to calm the traffic a little bit. And then these ideas came directly from the previous comp plan in 2007, and then also from our complete streets policy that we adopted in 2018. So, most of our goals and objectives in our current comp plan came almost directly from the 2007 comp plan. So it seems like Winonans have wanted this for at least 15 years since the last comp plan happened. Another thing that we talked about as an important goal was accessibility. So one thought we had was providing a more comprehensive, free, if possible, transit service. And I believe that got touched on in, I think it was the Economic Development Subcommittee just now, where that would help connect people to farther flung areas of Winona, such as, the Walmart area and further on the west end too. And then another is addressing the gaps in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure between major points of interest recognized in the engagement for the comp plan. So for example, a clear, intuitive way to get from the Sugarloaf Trailhead to Lake Park to Levy Park. And we kind of already have all of that there, but it's a matter of getting consistent signage. It's a matter of making sure that there's regular painting of things like bike lanes and the fog lines on the side of the road. And those are just two measures we thought of among, a huge grab bag of them. And then, like I said, all these things have been stated in previous city documents. The problem is they have not been implemented fully over the past 15 years. So in multiple instances during our meetings, we were impressed at the foresight of all these past plans, but we were a little disappointed at the failure to implement these plans. So to wrap it up, we want the comp plan to prioritize making Winona's transportation. Oh, gotta look at my notes. To make Winona's transportation accessible to all of its users, vehicle, transit, bikes, and walkers. And we'd like to see the ideas that we've all put forward for the past 15 years to be implemented. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Luke, I think. Yeah, and then questions, I'm obviously available.
Thank you, Mitch. I think that that provided a great overview, and I do want to emphasize that streets make up a significant portion of the land use in our community. So thinking about how that impacts all of the other elements of the overall comprehensive plan is really important. I'm going to walk us through briefly, kind of goal by goal, just to highlight the breadth of the conversation that we had. And that first goal is really improving public transportation in Winona and promoting increased use. And here we have some pretty creative ideas, things like user-friendly technology that are going to be beneficial for tracking where the nearest bus is, making sure that we have those at those transit stops, making sure that we have an app, for example. And then also lowering cost barriers to use was something that the subcommittee really felt was important. And one item here that's pretty innovative is considering fare-free transit. So how can we partner to do that, particularly for those who might be on lower incomes? And I wanted to highlight that for the steering committee here. Goal number 2 was bike lane infrastructure investments that connect destinations and integrate with other transportation systems. And when we talk about, those desirable elements of our community that improve our quality of life or are great for people to come and visit, how do we make sure that they get there? If you're getting off of a riverboat, you don't have a car, for example. So how can we get you on a bike to go hit those key areas? I do want to highlight item 2.5, which is a connection to the middle school for safe crossings across Highway 61. Obviously, we're having a large roundabout project there. That's only part of the way over to the middle school. It is one of the key draws that every child in our education network is going to be going toward. So we need to make sure that we have safe connections there. And that bleeds right into goal number 3, and that's safe routes to schools. We do want to consider having a safe routes to schools program in coordination with Winona Area Public Schools. And in particular, again, we call it out, improving access to the middle school for children attending school. When we look at what we want for our future and for how our children get to their education destinations, we want to make sure that they can do it safely, conveniently, and comfortably. On goal number 4, we continue to support the use of the Mississippi River for commerce, recreation, and transportation. And I want to highlight objective 4.1, which really speaks to balancing the needs of transportation, recreation, and environment. It's great to talk about connections to the river, but we also need to recognize that we have a very busy port system here in Winona, and we do have a number of businesses that also utilize the river for commerce. So we want to make sure that we're balancing those efforts. Jumping down to goal number 5, we do want to talk about improving the rail system in Winona, both for passenger rail and also for freight transportation. And the goal here is to minimize conflicts with the city's motorized and non-motorized transportation system. And one of the ways that we do want to do that, if we jump down to objective 5.4, is improving the amenities near passenger rail as well. So looking at the zoning around the passenger rail station, the Amtrak station, and kind of removing those regulatory barriers to promote commercial and housing reinvestment. You'll note in the heritage preservation section, there's also talking about creating that as a welcoming gateway to the community. So as you get to us via rail, how do you know that you're in Winona? How do you identify that you're in Winona? And how do you feel that you're already at home? Goal number 6 is developing a surface transportation improvements for the existing network. And here this really covers a broad range, things like safety and efficiency of truck routes and reevaluating what those truck routes are. And then jumping down to 6.3, incorporating traffic calming measures in future street construction and to address identified neighborhood problems. And here we're really emphasizing context sensitive design for residential streets that promote slow speeds. And that's really a continuation from our 2007 plan, which had very specific language related to that. Then also in 6.4, responding to and implementing the Complete Streets Policy and Pedestrian and Bicycle Plan when presenting items to governing bodies. So as we do have these great policy documents, we need to make sure that we're responding to them as we present to the Planning Commission, as we present to the City Council, essentially saying we don't want this plan to sit on a shelf. Jumping down to goal number 7, establishing a safe and efficient non-motorized transportation system that accesses all parts of Winona and the regional trails network. As you all are probably aware, we have a substantial park and recreation master plan, and that regional trails network and reaching into those recreation destinations is critical for our community. And I do want to note that here again, we want to look at context sensitive design. And if we look at objective 7.4, promoting the use of linear parks or parkways so that you feel safe, convenient, and comfortable. It should be easy for somebody who is walking around the lake to say, I want to go get a coffee in downtown, and be able to not even feel like they're walking on a small sidewalk next to a street, for example. Goal number 8, promoting and improving the public transportation system as a viable alternative to driving alone. This is really to emphasize that public transit is not just about providing that as an option. It needs to be a viable alternative. It needs to be something that people want to use. So it's not just something that is a service that we say, yeah, we support it, but it's bare bones. So we really want to promote that. Jumping over to goal number 9, that's page 6 of your section, page 33 of the overall document, continuing to support and improve the municipal airport to serve cargo and passenger demands and utilize space to meet community needs. This touches briefly on one of the objectives within the land use section, which is kind of reevaluating what is the land being used for over there and can it be used for a better use as well. Goal 10, maintaining and expanding commercial harbor and port facilities. We want to make sure that our commercial harbor continues to thrive, and we want to make sure that we're surveying the needs so that we're addressing what people and what our businesses absolutely need in those facilities. And goal 11, pursuing track and storage yard relocation. Some of this will be a new analysis. We already know that we've had phenomenal work over at the levee, making that become a welcoming space, but there still is a division line with rail trackage over there. So looking at where we can be successful for that. And jumping to goal number 12, page 7 of this section, page 34 of your document, supporting and enhancing passenger rail service. I do want to point out 12.1 once again, which is pursuing improvements to the Amtrak station. It is one of our cultural gems, as well as a place that people get their initial information. So how can we either seek volunteer or paid staff support in those areas? The subcommittee felt it was important to highlight that we did end up losing a staff member there in that Amtrak station. So how are people interacting with that place? And then jumping down to 12.6, supporting regional rail network planning in the surrounding region. Back in 2007, we had a completely different rail project called out specifically in the regional scale. And here we are calling out the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Chicago second train. But overall, as regional train facilities are being proposed, the city of Winona should be taking an active role in supporting them. Goal 13, revising truck routes through the city. And here we want to really assess the current truck routes, improve livability around those truck routes as well. And goal 14, prioritizing road improvements, considering and reassessing Mankato Avenue, and pursuing investments consistent with complete streets policy once again. And pairing priority road improvements and municipal maintenance of infrastructure with supporting grant cycles and investment opportunities. So if we know that we have a street that needs to be reconstructed, let's go ahead and target some of those grant opportunities and explicitly call it out. Having something like that in our comp plan is important when we do apply for those types of grants. And goal 15, prioritizing sidewalks and multimodal access in neighborhoods. This is specifically calling out the Unified Development Code to implement more sidewalks on both sides of public rights of way and new subdivisions. And implementing the complete streets policy and pedestrian and bicycle plan, that's goal 16. And that's really, again, don't want that plan to sit on a shelf. And goal 17, local street improvements to incorporate narrow street design based on urban street design guidance. This is really about advocating for that urban street design, recognizing that the city of Winona is an urban place and that there are urban street design guides within things like the Federal Highway Administration Standards, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, the Minnesota Department of Transportation standards, that we should be using those urban standards, not using something like a suburban standard. And then goal 18, promoting rectilinear subdivisions that support Winona's historic development pattern and connect into it. This kind of goes back to some of the land use conversation. We want to make sure that future subdivisions in the city of Winona feel like Winona. And part of that is trying to have that street grid pattern, trying to have the number of lots that are a little bit more densely populated so that our streets are actually being utilized. When we put them in, they're not just considered to be long driveways. That is a substantial, large section. Thank you all for letting me talk through that. If you have any questions, I am available for them.
Okay, thank you, Luke, and thank you, Mitch. Next, we will move on to accessible government, and we have Emily Kurash Casey joining us online. And Emily, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear. So what we're going to do is go ahead and advance to that section of our agenda today and go ahead with your summary. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Carlos. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Karash Casey. I'm really honored to be representing the Accessible Government Subcommittee today. A few key points that we want to draw your attention to before looking at the actual document. We were really making sure that we were doing 4 big things. Making sure that we were including diverse audiences in our conversation, and not just racial diversity, but income diversity, diversity of jobs and knowledge base and length of time spent in Winona. We also wanted to make sure that we were equitably sharing information so that people had the way to access information in the way they need it, not just one single way of information being available. We're also wanting to make sure that we were including options for access specifically calling out new technology options, recognizing that that is a significant way that people are getting their information and want to be interacting and receiving information from the city right now. And also in terms of accessibility, not just thinking with the DEI lens, but making sure it's accessible to folks who are working different shift jobs, with kids, without kids, different physical abilities, auditory abilities, visual abilities, really making sure that this was a comprehensive look at accessibility. We created 5 goals within those 5 goal areas. We made sure to have objectives and strategies. We also included measures of success to know if, when, and how those goals had been achieved. We really made a focus on both inward and outward clarity. So information coming from residents of Winona to city staff, how they're able to share and give information back to the city, as well as what the city, both elected officials, appointed folks, and staff members are sharing with the Winona public. We also spent a great deal of time focusing on prevention rather than cleanup. This is information meetings ahead of time, being more clear about public hearings, meetings for public projects that the public can access instead of just identifying a specific key audience that are being talked to. And in this, removing this feeling of hiding information and processes. While that is not what the city is doing, sometimes the feeling from residents is that the city is trying to make something unclear on purpose and hiding information from residents because they don't know how or what or when to access information. We also focused a lot about people and how people are able to access their relationship with the city, both appointed roles, commissions, how long those commissions are appointed for, length of terms, as well as how to run for office. What does that entail? And what are different roles required? What do city staff do versus appointed commissions versus elected officials, and clarifying those roles so that it's pretty easy to understand across the board. We also really wanted to focus on public hearing as well as general news and information awareness so that the city is sharing information as its own entity instead of relying on outside, potentially biased sources to be the bearer of information. And within that, clarifying the language. So if there is a meeting about a code or a public hearing coming up, making sure that that language is translated a bit so residents understand what message is trying to be shared or discussed, so that there are more people participating ahead of time when decisions are being made rather than after the time when they are complaining about a decision that has already been made. We also looked at cross-departmental communication and looking at how the departments within the city connect with each other and how information may or may not be shared and how that impacts the residents of Winona. One piece I can share with you is that we really spent a lot of time discussing concern about the lack of staff that is allotted for communicating with the public, and that is one of the single most important pieces in solving some of these issues. Not just creating new roles, but making sure people know who, what, and why communication roles exist. Carlos, that's the general overview. I'll turn it back to you to talk through the document in specific.
Sure, thank you, Emily. That was great. So in terms of accessible government, really this subcommittee was focused on improving relationships between the city and residents, and how do we move things further and make those relationships even stronger than what they already are today. And so really the committee's purpose was to take a look at how can communication be facilitated and increased? And how do we bring more people into the fold of local government and what we are doing here? So under the first goal, under our goals, objectives, and strategies is improving user-friendly communication from the city to residents. So this is the first goal has to do with what can the city do to improve communication with residents from the city's perspective. And that's where we took a look at things like centralizing communications through a position or a department responsible for city communications, increasing methods of communication, and then increasing and expanding the amount of easily accessed public information. You'll hear communication come forward again and again and again throughout this plan. And my most recent update to the city council, that was one of the main takeaways that I noted to the city council. Just within the past 10 to 15 years, the way that people access information and the methods that they use to obtain the news and what's going on in the community has diversified, changed, and has become much more multifaceted than it was before. And so we need to be able to adapt to that in order to get the word out about what's going on and help people understand a lot of the things that are functioning at City Hall. Under number 2, that shifts the focus from what can the city do to better enhance communication to what can individual residents, how can the city help build individual residents' capacity to interact with the city? So things like creating a how-to for public meeting participation under 2.1.1, doing a summary of Robert's Rules of Orders. Why do council members work, or why do council meetings work the way they do with motions and seconds and amendments, and just basically to create a stronger base level of understanding of how the city business works and how decisions are made. Also under 2.2, educate, inform, and involve people of varying ages, identities, life stages, abilities, races, and socioeconomic levels. So basically reaching out to more people. And that is right in line with number 2.3, which is reaching out to city residents, utilizing citywide communications such as utility bills to connect with everybody. And also creating a program for onboarding new residents as it pertains to city services and city programs. You're brand new to Winona, who do you call for this, that, and the other thing that you need to get done within the city here? Under number 3, enhancing the city of Winona's interactions with residents. Really, this goes to just one-on-one interactions that people have with the city. Under 3.2, we have good customer service when interacting with the public. This includes things like providing city materials in plain language, so that's easy to understand for somebody and more approachable. Also things like providing city material in multiple languages, and then implementing customer service oriented language when interacting with the public, inclusive language, things that we can do to make people feel welcome and able to participate in what is going on. There's a number of other points under that goal, but I'm going to skip to number 4, which is wider participation in city committee and elected offices. We think we have great participation right now, but there's always room to enhance that, especially on our boards and commissions that are at a different level than the city council. So how do we reach out to more people to get a better representation, or not just necessarily a better representation, but just more people involved? Goal number 5 is enhancing public understanding of values and purpose, informing city activities. So one thing we wanted to do in this section was take a look at a work plan for the city council, maybe every 2 years as city council members' terms are in those 2-year periods, and they set at the council for 2 years, creating some type of a strategic plan or work plan that would serve as a vehicle for communicating what the council's priorities are over a 2-year time period. Also creating an organization-wide vision and values for the city of Winona, and then a purpose statement for city of Winona departments to be able to help clearly communicate what each city department does to individuals who live in the city. And that's all I have. Any comments or questions on that?
All right, seeing none, unless anybody online would like to comment or submit a question. Going once, twice, 3 times. We will introduce Jerome Christensen to begin talking about the transformative project section of our comprehensive plan and how that process played out with that subcommittee.
And just real quick here before Jerome comes up, I'll just a couple quick words about transformative projects. This is a kind of a novel introduction into the city's comprehensive plan. It wasn't there in 2007, but we introduced it with this go around as a way to really kind of focus on what are some of the big ideas that people have for moving the city forward, and what are some things that could have an impact across the whole city, not just on a specific site or in a specific area. So that's really what we took a look at with this committee, and it was formatted a little bit different than the other committees where they came up with goals and objectives and strategies. This committee really focused on 3 particular projects that they thought would be transformative in the city moving forward, and 2 additional projects that were also discussed, but weren't felt to have the amount of impact across the community as the others. And so Jerome will talk a little bit about those.
Good afternoon. Yeah, this is a unique challenge, transformative, something that's going to affect the whole city for a long time. And the more I noodled over it, was a challenge for the committee to come up with, what's this going to be? And the more I noodled over it myself, looking back in living memory, I could only come up with really 3 projects that were, I think, truly transformative of the whole city. I'd go back to the early 1950s when Highway 61 was rerouted along the base of the bluffs along the old right-of-way of the Winona and Southwestern Railroad that opened up all of what was then farmland and marsh on the west end, became Westgate, became any number of housing developments, and really changed the face and the direction and the center of gravity of the city in terms of commercial and residential activity. Then again, the next one that really came to mind was in the early 1990s when the LumenNet project was proposed. Bringing fiber optics and digital technology to Winona and bringing it to the people of Winona through a community server, making us one of the first communities in the country to have internet access in private homes, really staking our claim on the digital frontier well ahead of anybody else, and something that is now is widely recognized as essential. And the third was really 2 projects that merged into one. First, starting with the flood control project in 1985, completed in 1985, that kept the Mississippi River out of our streets and homes after its completion, and really created the opportunity for the Lake Winona Dredge and Fill project, which opened up the area there by Riverbend for development, and completely shifted our retail focus of the city to the east side, and created a whole new regional retail center that created shifted the center of gravity in terms of commercial and industrial activity. Those are tough things to measure up to when we were looking at committee. That's why we came up with really 2 broad areas and 1 specific project. 2 broad areas we've already heard from today. That's both housing and economic development. And I think our take on that was not as a single project in either case, but in terms of what can the city do to facilitate, coordinate, and advance those projects, to promote partnerships, public-private partnerships, to explore opportunities and create opportunity, not necessarily being directly involved or looking at one single project, but making this a topic of priority in terms of policy and staffing. And I think that the staffing part of this can't be overemphasized, because if you don't have people to meet with the potential builders, contractors, with entrepreneurs, you're not going to be able to have that kind of an impact in terms of municipality. The other one is the Riverfront Trail. Again, that is a city, pretty much a city solo project, and it has has a great deal of potential beyond being a recreational area. That I think you've seen all the little bird scooters fluttering around town. That we're looking at potentially a new modes of transportation coming in. If we can have electric scooters that are recreational, electric bikes for the price of a year's insurance premiums, and you can, on your car, you can have an electric bike that will take you to work with virtually no effort. Envisioning a new transportation system that will facilitate alternative transportation modes is potentially transformative. So I guess those are the things that we're looking at, and looking at ways that and projects that are going to have a really lasting impact. And I'm going to let Carlos do the heavy lifting and tell you all about them.
All right, so the first one that you see up on the screen right now is the Riverfront Trail that Jerome mentioned. And this trail is actually identified in the 2007 comprehensive plan and had its own standalone section in terms of our riverfront revitalization plan. And so it was the main component of that plan, and we, as the subcommittee, thought it was the most important transformative project moving forward here in terms of what it would do for the city moving forward. And we wanted to make sure we continued to have that in the plan, recognizing all the work that has been completed since it was included in the 2007 comprehensive plan. And we also see work continuing on the trail for a number of years moving forward. Trails like this take a long time to complete. That's just the nature of the beast to a certain extent. And so continuing that focus on reorienting Winona to the riverfront and increasing that accessibility to the riverfront is something that we think will be paramount with this trail and with the project moving forward. So that's really the biggest one that we took a look at. And you'll also see the Riverfront Trail highlighted in our riverfront, downtown and riverfront committee. And we'll talk about that at the end of September here, but you'll see some of the things that are most important reiterated at a number of different points in the plan. So the Riverfront Trail is one of those. Another is economic development, and related to economic development is the second project that the committee focused on, which is incubator space. And the committee really thought this was a very important project to take a look at, given the number of successful models that are available in other cities of our size, but also because of our heritage as an entrepreneurial center and a center for business development and innovation. Who are the next people up? Where is the next idea going to come from that creates a company like RTP, creates a company like Fastenal, and brings people to live and work in the city of Winona? So the committee felt that a incubator space or programs that support the beginnings of new businesses is very crucial to focus on moving forward in the city here. And so one thing the committee acknowledged is that we did have a space that we took a look at for a couple of years, and it's instituted the garage in downtown, which is really a kind of a co-work space. Ultimately, that did not continue. The finances for that just didn't end up panning out, but we thought that that was a good thing to at least start with. And what can we take a look at in terms of lessons learned with that endeavor? And how can we take a look at what other cities are doing in order to support our own incubator space or incubator efforts within the city here? The final project that the committee thought was truly transformative is housing. And that's just based on the amount of feedback that we heard throughout the plan process and how important it is, not only to have people here to be able to find a place that they want to live, but also a place that they can call home and have access to not only the places that they need to get to, but the places that they want to visit as well. So housing is another thing that the committee wanted to specifically call out. Under other notable projects, there were two other projects that the committee talked about. The first was a WSU field house. This was identified in a recent planning document by WSU as a substantial project that they'll be taking a look at moving forward. And it's located generally north of Sarnia, between the streets of Huff and Main and south of the railroad tracks. And so it's basically an indoor athletics facility with some additional support services that are involved as well. And so the current state that the project is in, the committee thought it would be a very notable project. But the degree to which the project overall can incorporate greater needs of the community will help it to be more of a transformative project. And that's the message that they wanted to convey with listing this as another notable project, that yes, we know to a certain extent it's coming and it's important, but we will also want to see how can we integrate the community's needs into this larger overall project. And finally is the new police, fire and community services facility that we've been discussing over the past few months here at the city. And really, the committee took a look at this as being a little bit more of an essential function of a city versus a transformative project into the future. And so what the subcommittee decided to do was to make sure that it's part of the document, but to list it under other notable projects for that reason. So that's what I have. Any comments or questions? Sure. So all of the projects that we discussed are listed. So what we intended to do with this section is to do kind of a full write-up on those three that the committee thought were the most transformative, and make sure we included the last two that they discussed because we thought that they were important, just not as transformative or have as great of an impact as the other ones.
All right, any other questions or comments? Here again, I'd invite any of our friends online who haven't heard from yet. Seeing none, I'm going to stop sharing this document and I'm going to open it up to our steering committee. We do have a short 15 minutes here to see if there is any feedback that you'd like to provide to these first 7 sections of the comprehensive plan, draft goals and objectives. And really just hear from you, what resonated, what didn't resonate, what do you feel like we might need to look at more? And while we only have 15 minutes here, I do want to note that if you look at your next step section, which is section 3 of your agenda packet, we are budgeting time to invite you all back for workshops. So we're expecting a lot more discussion about this, but if you have any first impressions, we would love to hear them.
I think they were, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
I was just going to comment. I mean, I thought all of the committees did a great job. You know, it's clear that there's a lot of interconnection between each of the different areas. And I think, you know, what came to mind for me was, you know, where in sort of the synthesis of a lot of this or boiling it down, where could you get 2 FERs and 3 FERs? So where do you get some projects that would really build and feed on each other, that just sort of build over time, you know, the next 10 years or 15 years or something like that, where there's that connectivity, as opposed to like standalone, you know, topics, you know, because I think I think there was just a lot in here that connected that could be pretty powerful if they were thought about in that sort of an integrated manner.
Thank you, Rochelle. Lori?
Yeah, mine was more on just the presentation part of it. I thought everybody did a great job. I'm excited to see the final projects. One thing that always concerns me when I see things like this is when we have acronyms, and I think they always need to be spelled out so the Joe Blow public can read them and understand what they are. I liked seeing how, as Rochelle was saying, how things interact across the different subcommittees and how can we put some of those together to get bigger bang for our buck as such. And some duplicity, I think, where maybe you don't need as many bullet points under each objective because they're stated in another manner in the same place. But that's because these were done while budgets were being looked at here at the city level. So I think everyone that's been involved has done a really great job. And thank you.
This is Nathan. I would echo the same sentiments as prior to there. I would say that there is a theme that has run through all of them, that it seems that Winona wants to be more flexible. We want to be easier to work with. We want to allow more things. So I don't know if there's a way to capture that from the steering committee side, but it did seem that was one of the underlying themes, along with housing, outdoors, downtown, riverfront. I mean, really the things that are in the news every day that impact Winonans and to some extent the rest of the people in the country are dealing with some of these same things. So I think there's some pretty clear objectives that came out of all the work from the committee. So good job.
Any other initial thoughts here?
I would also like to commend everyone for their hard work. Certainly you can tell some thoughtful engagement certainly occurred. I would like to note, I did like the plans that had strategies. And I know that there's probably different levels of where this would potentially go next, as well as success indicators. And to be thoughtful as we try to distill down and find the big rocks that we can move, maybe address some of the potential risks or unintended consequences with some of the proposed considerations, just to make sure we're looking at it from a 360 degree. Thank you.
Thanks. That's really valuable feedback. Any other people, final little thoughts here before we maybe take a look toward our next steps? All right, I'm not really seeing anybody jumping to grab a microphone or unmuting themselves online. I do want to thank all of you, and I also want to really commend our subcommittees. We had, just in these first 7 subcommittees, we had 52 different meetings amongst these 7 subcommittees, and it's almost 70 participants. So we're really looking at a lot of members of the public who were able to provide valuable feedback and help direct this process. But wait, there's more, because we are going to have 5 more sections of the comprehensive plan covered on September 29th of this month. And those 5 sections are also going to be represented by members of those subcommittees. And we will again walk through those different sections and go through those goals and objectives. I do want to note that we will probably have a little bit more time after that meeting to discuss, but we are scheduling a workshop session to cover all 12 of these sections of the comprehensive plan on October 13th. But we also want to invite you back next Thursday in case you want to give us more feedback for these first 7. So we will not be strangers over the next month and a half, and we will be diving into it all before we come up with that first draft of the comprehensive plan, which we intend to get out to the community before the holiday season. So we will see you all next week, and then again 2 weeks after that. And if there are no further comments, Lori, you look like you want to say something though.
I just want to know a question. Are you going to give us some direction on what we should bring to this next meeting of the steering committee?
Yes, I will. Yes, we will send out notices to you, and you will have lots of words from me to help provide direction there. So we will anticipate a deeper dive into all of this, and we will be methodical about it, I promise. All right. Seeing no further comments, we will turn you loose 19 minutes early. It's always good to end a little bit early. And I want to thank you all once again for your time. Have a lovely day.